Hey folks, Scott Son of a Hillbilly here, and today we're talking about the top 5 types of bass baits that are out there. Let's get started. Well, our first type of bait we're going to talk about will be the spinner bait. Now there's tons of different kinds of spinner baits out there. You have single bladed, you have double bladed, you have Colorado blades, you have willow blades, you have buzz baits. The list is endless. But that happens to be one of my top #1 bass fishing lures. I really like using spinner baits to catch bass. I've caught them mainly on a white spinner bait, but let me show you the differences. So first here, we have a white spinner bait, which is my favorite color, with willow blades. Now these willow blades, and if you'll see that, the willow blades are long and thin. These willow blades have little sparkles painted on them. I like a silver willow blade. There's also willow blades that are copper. There's a lot of different willow blades, but this particular one isn't a bad one. I prefer the single spinners. So we got the willow blades. Next, I'm going to show you, this is probably one of my ultimate favorite type of lures right here. The white, and I would say that's probably about a half-ounce jig head with a single Colorado blade. Now the Colorado blades are more oval as opposed to the willow blades, so we'll see that. That's my #1 fishing lure. I've caught more fish on this. I've caught northern pike, I've caught tons of bass, I've caught all kinds of species on that. Next one we're going to talk about, and I'm going to show you a white double bladed Colorado. This is my second favorite bait. I like it in white. I like the white living rubber jig on there, and I like the Colorado blades. Those are my favorite. When we start getting a little creative, we have another Colorado blade spinner here, as you can see that, with red and yellow, or chartreuse actually. Some people call it yellow, I call it chartreuse. Another fine example of a single bladed white. This one, I don't know if you'll be able to pick that up in the video, but it has a hammered finish. Instead of a smooth silver finish on the blade, it has a hammered finish. The dimples in there reflect more light. It'd be just like the idea of a disco light, where all the different lights hit it in different facets and shines it all over the place. Next, I'm going to show you a larger spinner bait. It's great for northern pike and muskie. This is a large bucktail spinner bait. We have a combination of a semi-willow and a Colorado blade on there. This thing is going to make a lot of noise. Yeah, I'll catch bass on this too, but you'll catch northern pike and muskie on this one as well. All these different baits are really good for a variety of different fish. And then I'll show you another bucktail. We got it in a chartreuse and an orange color. And again, we have a willow blade, and we have a small Colorado blade on this. Very nice. These are the safety pin style, of course. And the last type of spinner bait I want to talk about is a buzz bait. Now buzz baits have a little metal blade on the top. As you pull it through the water, it's designed to be pulled across the top of the surface of the water. That's going to make a lot of noise, and it's really great for attracting bass. It'll also get the attention of northern pike and other species. So spinner baits, #1. Alright folks, we're going to talk about #2 of the best baits out there for bass. #2 would be the crankbait, and I've got a variety of them here to show you. Crankbaits are basically hard-bodied little lures. They can be made out of balsa, they can be made out of various types of wood, plastic, metals, all kinds of different materials. Makes no difference. It's basically your hard-body lure, and it usually has 2 treble hooks on the back. They're designed to look mainly like fish, but I've seen them in crawdads, I've seen them in crickets, I've seen them in all kinds of different things. Frogs, you name it, mice, they've made them into a crankbait. Now this one is, for its size, and it's a smaller crankbait, is a deep diving. See how long that bill is on it? So that'll dive down fairly deep. And also the line attaches to the bill itself. Next one is a medium diver. These crankbaits kind of get hooked up to each other, so, excuse me. All right, medium diver. and you'll see this is a pretty good size lure right here. This one will catch bass, it'll catch northern pike, catch muskie, but we're talking about bass today, folks. So if we look at this, you'll see where the line attaches right on the nose. So what that does, it makes it into a medium diving lure. You don't have to worry about it going really deep, and it's not a surface lure. It'll dive 2 to 3 feet. Now we have another longer minnow style. As soon as I get the hook out of my finger. There we go. And you'll see again, this is minnow shaped. This is a Berkeley shad with a deep diving type of a bill on it. The line attaches straight to the bill itself. So you're going to get probably 6 to 8 feet out of this one. So it's a fairly deep diving lure. Another type of a crankbait out there is one without a bill on it. And this one can be fished at all different types of depths. And this is your good old rattle trap lure. You see how that baby looks right there. The line attaches to the top of the lure. It gets in the water, makes a very, very, very tight vibration on this lure. And it's a nice crankbait. You can fish that shallow, you can fish it deep, you can fish it whatever level you want. Count it down, you can jig it off the bottom. Great, great crankbait. On this lure right here, I caught like a 5-pound carp on it, which was really pretty funny. Fishing for bass, and all of a sudden I get a big bite, and I'm like, man, this bass is fighting really strange. I didn't understand it one bit. I get it in the shore, it had it stuck in its mouth right on the lip, right over here. So this is pretty interesting to have caught a carp with a crankbait. Okay, now we have more surface style crankbaits. Take a look here. I've got a surface style. See how long and skinny that is? Rapala makes a lot of lures that look like this. Rapala is an excellent brand. This one I'm not sure who makes it. This is an older bass musky lure, more for surface jigging along. You can pull it along too. It would wobble right at the surface, but only probably go maybe a foot deep tops. You want to work this along the surface. Last one I'm going to show you is not a, is a medium diving type lure. Could probably dive to 2 or 3 feet, but it's a jointed minnow. Now all these, there's so many different variations of crankbaits, and you'll see the joint, how the back end of that lure works back and forth. So that's a pretty good lure right there. So number 2, crankbaits. I'm not going to go into all the different types, just want to show you a few. Number 2, crankbaits. All right, folks, we're going to talk about bass bait number 3, and we're talking about jigs. And I am specifically talking about my favorite type of living rubber jig. Man, do I love this bait. This bait is, I have caught so many bass on a living rubber jig. I like the little living rubber fingers on it. They're pretty weedless. They got little weed guards on them. This is probably about a 5/8 ounce bait right here. Versatility. You can get them in lots of different colors. You can fish these things on the bottom. You can pull them through the water like a crankbait. You can jig them straight up and down off of your boat. You can flip them. Tons of stuff. And you can fish them just a jig alone, but you should always, I prefer to put some type of a pork frog or some other type of soft plastic on the back as a trailer. So this is one color. My favorite is the crawdad color. Now here's one that's been beat pretty hard. I've caught a lot of bass on this. You can see I'm going to have to replace the living rubber skirt on it. Got myself a little soft rubber frog type of thing on the back here. It kind of looks like a pork frog, but it works fine. And this thing's been hit so many times by bass that the skirt's gone. And that is a crawdad color. It's one of my other favorites. You'll see here another living rubber jig. This one's in kind of a brownish with kind of a crawdad colory skirt on it. This one's a new one I've got. Boy, this baby's going to be hit a lot this spring. And of course you can go with white. It doesn't matter what colors you pick. It does matter. I like crawdad. That's just crawdad, black and brown, stuff like that. White will be a good one to try too. I haven't done a lot of white, but I'm going to try that white in combination with this white pork frog. And we'll see how that looks. That's going to be a really white. So, attaching a pork frog, you just hook it through like that. So that lure is going to really look very active as it comes through the water. Those little legs are going to flip. As it's going up and down, you're going to see tons of motion. So you can see why this is such a powerful lure. Jigs, number 3. Don't forget them. There are other types of jigs too. Of course, you have them without the living rubber on them. You can put soft bodies on them. They're fished so versatile. There are probably millions of combinations that you can do with jigs. But I would highly recommend that you have those first 2 and this jig in your arsenal. All right, folks, we're going to talk about the 4th type of lure. And we're talking about a good old classic. We're talking about spoons. And this one is probably one of my favorite type of spoons to fish for bass. This is your old Daredevil spoon. Say you got the red and white pattern on that. On the back you have silver. You have one trailer on the back, or one treble on the back of this. And you can add trailers, you can add living rubber to it, you can add minnows, you can add worms, leeches, you name it. Makes it to a very versatile lure. Now this lure is not weedless. You can see that. Those treble hooks go out there just like your crankbaits. You're going to be tossing those babies out there. You got to fish them in a semi-open area. Otherwise you're going to be hanging up or pulling lots of weeds in. That's with this particular type spoon. Now we go to another spoon. And this one has a weed guard on it. So this one is a lot more versatile. Already has its living rubber skirt on it. You can still tip that thing with a night crawler, with a leech, with a pork frog, with a soft rubber lure on the back. You name it, this is a very versatile lure. It can be fished in heavily weeded areas. You can pull it across the lily pads. Spoons, they do a lot of stuff. You can troll spoons, you can cast spoons, you can jig spoons. You can jig them up and down, you know, just like you can with most of these other lures. Now this one, probably next little jig or spoon I'll show you, probably falls more into the crankbait category, but I still consider a spoon. You can see it's just a thin blade of metal. So that falls into the spoon category for me. Has a little leaded weight front, and it's pulled very similar to the rattle trap, but you could jig this one up and down just like a regular jig. You could pull it like a spoon. You could put trailers on it. Spoons. So number 4, we're talking spoons. Okay, folks, we're down to number 5 of the top bass baits. Last, but definitely not least, I save this category for the last because it is the biggest category out there. I've mentioned it a little bit in some of my other baits I talked about, and we're talking about the soft plastic lure. Yeah, baby, we're talking about soft plastics. We're talking about plastic worms. We talk about plastic worms with little twisty tails on them. We're talking about tube baits with all kinds of living rubber fingers on the end. We're talking about lizards, soft lizards. You've got little minnows, you know, look like little fish with little tails on the end. You've got crawdads. All soft baits. All these baits are probably some of the top baits that you could ever fish with out there. You're going to be catching all kinds of bass. You'll catch bluegill, you'll catch walleye, you'll catch muskies, northerns, you'll catch smallmouth. I don't care. You're going to catch tons of fish with soft plastic baits. And I talk last for this category because there's so many freaking types out there. Just look at this little bit. And I just pulled a few out of my tackle box of lures that I have. I have got dozens more of soft baits. You can fish these things on jigs. You can fish these things on Texas rigs, Carolina rigs, just plain hooks. You can do silly rigs. You can do all kinds of stuff with these things. I mean, you can fish them just like you're fishing with a bobber and a hook. And just put a hook in and cast them out. Hell, they'll work fine that way. So we're talking about number 5. Last, probably the best or top one next to spinner baits in my opinion. The way I rank them would be number 1 would be the spinner baits. Number 2 would be soft plastics. Number 3 would be crankbaits. Number 4 would be jigs. Number 5 would be spoons. And with the jigs, I'd probably toss that and go above crankbaits a little bit with those because of the versatility of them. But those are my top bass lures. That doesn't mean that they're my top lures for all my fishing, but when it comes to bass and putting bass on your in your creel and pulling them in and getting the big ones, all these lures will do it. All right, I hope you folks enjoyed that. Top 5 spinner baits, crankbaits, jigs, spoons, soft plastics. Till next time, folks, this is Scott, son of a hillbilly, saying bye for now.